Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm social media and community coordinator for Hyperluminal Games. My pronouns are she, they. I have short blonde hair. I'm wearing pink cat ear headphones, and I am wearing a tie-dye black and orange t-shirt.
Hi, I'm Sierra. I'm Accessibility and UX Design Manager at Hyperluminal Games. My pronouns are she, her, and I have short red-brown hair, which is currently cut in a curly bob, and I am wearing a dark green cardigan.
It's very cute, by the way. I love
Thank
the
you. Thank
mushrooms on
you.
the shoulder. Very
Thank
sweet.
you very much. Yeah, I'm digging the mushroom vibe at the
Yeah,
moment.
100%. It's very in keeping with Pine Hearts.
Yes, yeah, channeling Pine Hearts
For
today for
sure.
sure.
So we're here today to talk a little bit about the accessibility features that have gone into Pine Hearts. So wanted to start by asking why accessibility in games is important to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so I guess there's a couple of aspects to it. The first is that, I've been working in the UX and UI design space for nearly 14 years now, and it's always been something I've been really passionate about trying to push in the studios and the projects that I work on. But I always kind of hit roadblocks along the way because it ultimately really needs, stakeholder and kind of director backing, the people who kind of hold the budgets, so to speak. So it was always something I kind of wanted to drive, but really couldn't for a long time at the different places I was working. So when I joined Hyperluminal, it was really exciting because the directors, Rob and Stuart, were really keen to start looking into the accessibility work. So when I joined, it was something they were really interested in me being able to get kind of a foothold in. But on a more personal level as well, I was also diagnosed with ADHD about 4 years ago when I was age 32. And I think the process of going through diagnosis and realizing that I had spent an awful lot of my working adult life undiagnosed and kind of fighting against my own brain and trying to work out how to sort of overcome that really made me very hyper aware of the kinds of barriers that other people face, in the world. So I think it was really important to me to try and make a difference in that space. And I can't obviously make the whole world more accessible, but hopefully I can make a little bit of an impact, at least one game at a time. And so yeah, so that's really where I kind of got involved with it.
That's
So
really cool.
yeah, how about yourself, Melissa?
Accessibility for me uh more comes from a place of community. I mean, like as it comes with the territory of the job, I guess. But before doing social media and community for Hyperliminal, I kind of did it for myself, doing content creation and stuff, and starting to build that community and have that like kind of connection with people was really lovely. And knowing that there were needs that people maybe had where they couldn't engage to that level of like wanting to feel as seen or as part of the community as they possibly could be, finding out that there were ways that we could make that more accessible for people was something that I became very passionate about. And it's something that I've definitely been more involved with in the last couple of years, especially like since it's been more of a thing for us that you've been championing. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to look into it more. But yeah, it's been very much the community aspect of wanting people to feel involved in the game.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Melissa. I think from my perspective, it's lovely to see the work that you are doing because I think it's
Thank
like
you.
it's the other half of the coin, right? Like we're doing the work that we can internally and in the game, but it's so important to communicate that out, but also to listen, right? To understand what the issues are for the community. And we won't hit everything with Pine Hearts the first time around, but we'll take in as much of the feedback as we possibly can and carry it forward with us. And building a good relationship with the community and making sure that they feel heard is really, I think, so important. So it's really exciting for me to see you carrying that on the side that you are on as well.
Thank you. So yeah, if you do have any feedback, please let us know because we're all ears. We want to know and we want to make things better for the future. um okay, so getting started into like Pine Hearts itself, how did the conversation about accessibility start for Pine Hearts? Like where did that kick off?
Yeah, yes. So, I mean, I joined Pine Hearts originally to work on the UX and the UI, and we got to the point where we had just finished building the vertical slice for Pine Hearts, and we actually had a really unique opportunity that kind of came in the door that Rob brought to me and was like, "Hey, I really think we should do this," which came in the form of an inclusive design bootcamp that was hosted by In-Game and Story Futures, and was supported by an organization called Open Inclusion. So it was a 4-day boot camp, and we took 4 members of our team, including myself, onto that boot camp. And there was a lot of quite intensive sort of accessibility and inclusive design training in that. But also we had the opportunity to work and speak directly with a panel of kind of different access community members who really represented a very wide range of different accessibility needs. So that was extremely informative. And I think they were very, very humble and open, with their stories and the kind of barriers that they face, particularly around playing games. And also interacting with technology in general as well. So that was really insightful for our team. And that's really what kind of kicked the process off. But off the back of that kind of boot camp also led into the opportunity to pitch for a place on a longer 8-week accelerator program. And that program came with funding as well. So that meant that, we could really invest some actual time and some actual resources into taking what we had learned and applying it to Pine Hearts specifically.
Sure.
So as a team, we pitched for that, and I'm very pleased to say we won that. So we spent 8 weeks doing that accelerator program, and trying to figure out essentially how we were going to build accessibility into Pine Hearts. And a lot of what we pitched against for that accelerator was not just about sort of building one specific setting for Pine Hearts and focusing on one specific access barrier, but rather figuring out, a better process for building games in a more accessible way. So really looking at, how can we make it sustainable for us as a studio? What tools can we employ to make that feasible? But also, how do we actually build it into the scheduling and into the project pipeline and all of those other things? So it was a really big learning process, but that's really what kicked it off.
Yeah, that's really cool. I can imagine the funding was incredibly useful because, like, especially as indie companies, like your budget only goes so far, and so thinking about additional things, unfortunately, like accessibility, if it's not part of like the core game function, it becomes like an excess cost. And so having access to something that would allow you to put the time and the energy into creating that, I'm sure that was a big help.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it goes back to what I said before about, getting stakeholders and sort of budget holders on board. It's much easier to do that when, there's suddenly a little buffer of money to go along with that. And I think, it gave us almost permission as a studio to go, yes, let's do this. Let's invest time and money in it. And ultimately we probably ended up using more than that budget, right? But it was a kicking off point. And I think as a studio and a culture, it really ended up kind of being a stone that gathered moss. It really helped everything to kind of roll on from there. So it was really, really valuable to get that first kind of drop in the ocean, so to speak,
For sure.
in terms of money. Yeah, so
nice, cool. Well, are you able to tell me a little bit more about the accessibility features that are included in the game?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we've got around about 10 settings in the game in total that will be coming out on launch. I won't go into all of them today, but I'll cover some of the highlights. So 2 of the most prominent ones that we've got in the game at the moment are our color blocking mode, which essentially applies block colors to key interactive elements and characters, as well as the playable character. And it is really intended to try and provide a little bit of better access and clarity for players who maybe have sort of moderate visual impairments, right? So it should ideally help them to quite quickly and clearly identify what they need to interact with and where they're trying to get to. One of the other settings that we have gotten is simplified controls, so that basically removes the need for any timed or prolonged button presses. So it replaces them with a single button input. So again, it's intended to try and support players who maybe have upper body dexterity needs, or else perhaps deal with joint pain or dexterity issues. So again, that one's kind of in there from the get-go. We've also implemented a run toggle, which funnily enough ended up becoming the default. So originally you used to have to hold a button down to make Tyke run through the game. And we ended up putting in a toggle setting that would allow you to have the run as Tyke's default movement speed. And we ended up just deciding to make that the actual default. So you can still go into the game and change that. So you can change it back so that he walks, but it is actually now our default setting that he
just
runs.
looks so happy when he's running.
He does. He's so joyful. It's such a joy. Yeah, exactly. And why have an extra button press for it, right?
Exactly.
It just didn't really make sense. So that ended up being the default, but we've still got granularity in there, so you can change that stuff around, which is great. We also have some settings in around font scaling and kind of spacing as well, so that hopefully you can adjust the font to be something that is readable and usable for you. And we have a dyslexic font option in as well. So the base font in Pine Hearts is intended to be dyslexia friendly, but we also have an alternative font that is, so the base font's kind of like a handwritten font, and the alternative font is just a nice simple sans serif font. So hopefully, depending on what suits you best, there's an option there available for you. So that covers off some of the settings that we've got. There's quite a few.
There's so many. We could have been here for like a whole hour just talking about what's in there. I think my favorite thing that you guys implemented is the onboarding flow that you see like as soon as you jump into the game. Like they'll run you through like a couple of different options. So the simplified controls and the color blocking mode are both included in that as choices for you to make for what you want for your gameplay experience before you even get into a menu, into the loading screen of the game. And I think like that's one of those big things that's kind of missing in different games. Like, yeah, cool, you've got these options in the menus, but you're going to have to go through however many intro cutscenes or like tutorials before you can even get to that point where you can change them. And so having that from the get-go is something that I've not seen before, but I thought it was a really cool idea.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen it in a few places now, but at the time that we started looking at it, it wasn't something I'd really seen anywhere either. But that one came really directly from kind of community feedback from that very first panel that we talked to. One of the things that they expressed they were so frustrated with games was that so many tend to force you, directly into gameplay or into some form of a tutorial before they can get access to the settings menu and change things. So that was something that, we tried to tackle two ways. So the first was with that kind of Fatui onboarding flow, so that hopefully you can set a few basic settings, up front. And we tried to include good kind of descriptions of what those settings do and visuals as well. But also straight after that, you've got immediate access to the options menu, and no matter where you are in gameplay, you can bring it up as well. So trying to really make it as easy to access as possible. And then the other thing that we did within the settings menu itself is actually putting all of the accessibility settings under their own heading. So it was just easier to find things, because that was the other kind of key bit of feedback that we got, was that players were really frustrated with having to dig through settings menus and not knowing upfront what settings were actually available to them, because they might be hidden under, a different heading that wasn't necessarily what they were maybe anticipating or looking for. So just trying to make that really upfront and apparent right at the start. So yeah.
Yeah, I also really like that the accessibility like menu UI is like at the start of the settings menu. Like it makes it so straightforward to just be like exactly the first thing that you find. But yeah, those are some really cool things that we've got added. I'm excited to see it all come together in the final thing. So what do you think is the thing that you're most proud of achieving in terms of accessibility within Pine Hearts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think like that accessibility onboarding flow was something that I felt was really important to get in, and I think there's lots of things I would love to do, to improve it in the future, or to do more with it in the future. But I think, given the settings that we had in the game and where we were at, I think it's a really great starting point, and it's been really lovely to hear feedback about that and people who get it, who also really appreciate it. So it's great to see that go in and it be valuable to people. So that's been really, really lovely. I think I also particularly, I particularly enjoyed pulling together like the accessibility summer showcase that we put a video together for that back in, I think it was July of last year,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like kind of a really defining milestone moment for me and for the team. I think just seeing just all of the work that had gone in so far and everyone's efforts kind of pulled together. Sometimes you get kind of down in the trenches and you don't
For
necessarily
sure.
see the work that's coming in, and so pulling together that video and actually sort of capturing footage of all the settings we had done so far, that was really kind of such a lovely moment, just to see what had been achieved. And it was kind of like, oh wow, we're actually doing this. We said we were going to do accessibility, and we're actually doing it, which is really
Absolutely, you
exciting.
are.
So yeah, so that was a really good moment as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Amazing. I think one of the best things that's come out of doing accessibility for Pine Hearts is seeing how that's kind of been taken and thought throughout like the rest of the studio now. Like it's starting to become more commonplace within the studio for people to consider accessibility, not just on Pine Hearts, but we now have people in the QA team looking at accessibility and some of the other things that we're working on, or it's being brought into some of the other projects. I've been taking it onto like how to do things online, or when we've had people visiting the office space, we've had that in mind of how do we make this visit more accessible for people, and how do we make sure people's needs are met when people are coming into the office. So I think it's just been overall beneficial for like the whole company culture to start having this conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's like one of the key things we really wanted to aim for with the whole process, right? It wasn't just about making Pine Hearts an accessible game, right? It was about building a culture around accessibility and building accessible games, right? And that percolates to every department and to every role across the studio for sure. I joke a lot that it takes a village to build an accessible game, but it's true, right? You
Mm-hmm.
really do need input from people across every part of the pipeline. And as you say, obviously the focus has been trying to build accessibility into Pine Hearts, but actually the work is starting to percolate out into other projects that we're working on, which is really wonderful to see. We've worked with
Mm-hmm.
some external clients on some accessibility stuff since we started the work on Pine Hearts as well. And that's something I hope that continues to grow, and
For
that
sure.
the rest of the studio feels like they have a voice and are able to champion that stuff as well. And I think the other thing that's been really heartwarming for me is that, as a studio and a group of people, there are a huge number of people across the studio that are really deeply passionate about it, either because it affects them personally or because they have a family member or a loved one or somebody they know, that maybe hits barriers when they want to play games. And so it's been really, really lovely to see their input on it, and them championing it and pushing it, and yeah, it makes it worthwhile, really, knowing
Yeah.
that knowing that it impacts our internal team as well as people out there who might pick up and play something like Pine Hearts, right?
For sure. It's been really lovely. It's been an incredible experience. And like speaking about taking what we're working on and like pulling that forward is something that I want to come back to in a little bit. But first, I wanted to ask you what you think one of the most challenging obstacles that you had to overcome while developing the features for Pine Hearts was.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, there's a few. I think the biggest one, very honestly, is time and scope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Pine Hearts was always intended to be, a kind of a small scope, small team project, and ultimately, I think it ended up being a bigger team and maybe a
Mm-hmm.
bigger project than we anticipated. But we were always kind of up against those constraints, and trying to figure out how to build an accessible game within those constraints was really challenging at times, both in terms of like figuring out where in the pipeline we should, fit the work, but also in terms of, being honest with ourselves about what we had time to do scope for and what we didn't, right? And so
For sure.
very early on, we had to make some really tough decisions about, features we weren't going to include that would have probably supported specific barriers. And then later on in development, we also had to cut a couple of features, right? So those are some tough calls that you gotta make along the way. But I
Mm-hmm.
think ultimately we made them with the best of intentions, in that we've got to also look after our internal team and make sure that we're making the game in a way that is sustainable for our team members, and also aim to try and make the features the best that they can be. And so we got to a point where we realized it was better to do less and try and do it as well as we could than to try and do lots and maybe not quite hit where we wanted to hit with them. So
For sure.
so
Yeah.
that was definitely challenging. And I think, we've had lots and lots of lessons learned about the development pipeline, and I think there's lots that we want to take forward in terms of figuring out how to do that better going forward as well. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of next steps, I guess.
Yeah. Speaking of next steps,
Sure. Yeah.
you segued me right into my next question. Really lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Basically, what do you think the plans for accessibility within Hyperluminal and Little Knit games looks like going forwards?
Sure. So I mean, as a studio and as a kind of, I guess, a development team, for me, the next steps is really around internal training and the champions program. So we've kind of kicked that off over the past 2 years, but it's something I really want to dedicate a lot more direct focus on going forward. So I really want to give more members of the team across the studio the confidence to drive that work forward without me, right? So
Yeah.
I don't need to be in every call in every project, but knowing that they have enough information and enough understanding to hopefully drive that stuff forward elsewhere, and that we've got good robust processes for doing that as well. So that's a big thing from my perspective in terms of the studio and the culture. And in terms of our games, the aim really is to keep aiming to make each game more accessible than the last. So part of that is building on the settings and accessibility toolkit that we've built and adding more features to that. But also, I guess it's kind of reflecting back on features we've already made and figuring out if there's ways we can make them better and hopefully more valuable to players as well. So yeah, that's the aim. The aim is to keep making each game a little bit more accessible than the last.
For sure. So some of those, like, one of those things like we might have dropped in the last game, we might be able to have the scope to pick up in the next one.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some challenges with Pine Hearts, we knew we couldn't address because there weren't any tools out there to help support us to do that.
For sure.
And ultimately making those tools would have been an entire project all of its own. So we ultimately couldn't do that. But now there are some open source tools available that we might allow us to tackle some of those challenges going forward. So it's really exciting for me to see what we might be able to take on next. And I'm looking forward to the next project and what we're going to hopefully aim to do for that.
Absolutely. It's exciting. The open source toolkits that we've kind of been shown and that we saw at the Games Accessibility Conference and we're kind of highlighted through that look amazing. And knowing that like the studios that maybe have like the resources, the time, the money that they can pour into doing stuff like that, and then they're making that available to smaller teams that might not be able to have like the same resources, like it's so beneficial. And I'm excited to see what we can do with it, and I'm excited to include more people in the next game, basically.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, definitely me too.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to, I think for me as a designer as well, like the joy of working in accessibility is it's always about trying to innovate and tackle a challenge, right? So I'm looking forward to taking on some new challenges with it, with the next project for sure. So yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, do you have any final thoughts on anything accessibility related for Pine Hearts, the games industry at large?
Yeah, I mean we're super close to shipping, which is really exciting. We now have an official launch date, which
23rd
is
of May.
So yeah, 23rd of May, so coming soon. So I'm really excited for the game to come out and hopefully be out in the hands of people and see what people think and really hear feedback from the community. Obviously, we've had a couple of touch points along the way, like EGX, and we were demoing at WAS the other week as well. So we've had bits and pieces of feedback along the way, but I think getting the game out there really and seeing what people say is going to be really wonderful. It's going to be great to get that kind of constructive feedback as well. Sure. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the game coming out and kind of having that one done and dusted and maybe moving on to the next. So, yeah, that's definitely what I'm looking forward to. So
nice.
How about you?
I hate to piggyback off your answer, but yeah, absolutely, me too. I'm excited to hear what people have to say, what people really enjoy from the features that we've added in, and where people think that we could improve, and like if there's anything in the features that we already have that they feel like we could expand on. just because like you never really know if you don't personally need certain adjustments to be made, you don't know how that's going to affect people until it's in their hands. And so I'm excited to see how people might use different features and how we can go about making that easier for folks in future. That's how I'm feeling about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we always design with the best of intentions, but it's
For
it's
sure.
always really interesting to get something out into players' hands and see how they actually use it. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. That's going
Yeah,
to be really interesting to see. So
I'm excited for it. It'll be fun. Cool. Right. Well, thank you very much for sitting and chatting with me, Sierra.
my pleasure.
Pine Hearts will be available on the 23rd of May. It's going to be out on Nintendo Switch and on Steam. So make sure to wishlist on both of those devices while you can. And if you have any feedback from any of the accessibility features that you are working on, or not working on, playing with, that we've been working on, please do let us know either in our Steam community tab or on Twitter. We're available there, Pine Hearts Game and Little Nook Games. We'd be more than happy to hear your feedback so that we know what to work on in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.